What is up, everybody? I hope you are having a fantastic evening. The question of the night is, did the 49ers close the gap on the rest of the NFC? We'll talk about that, plus more, next. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And I got my guy Marco Martinez in the building. What's up, Marco?
What's up, man? How you been?
Good, man. You know, it was nice to see you at the draft. You popped in for a little bit. We got to chat. I don't even remember. That whole week was like a blur. The weekend. That was second and third round, right? That you popped
Yeah,
in?
I popped in right after it was right before Stout was drafted. So we got to talk a little bit about Stout, and then obviously we talked a little bit about why can I keep drawing a blank with the linebacker they just drafted. But
Nick Martin.
yeah, dropped Nick Martin, popped in a little bit right after that, and then right before the pick.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, first of all, let's talk about, because we only talked about that little sliver, and we obviously have a text thread and we talk all through that. But I am curious to know who is it out of this draft that you liked the most that the 49ers got, and why?
Man, out of this draft, I would probably go. It's kind of a hard one, right? Because like when you look at the 49ers draft, like people are going to be like, "Oh, Michael, right?"
Yeah.
I wasn't huge on Michael. So, like, when I'm looking at the 49ers draft class, I honestly think Alfred Collins is probably gonna be their best player or their best pick. Now they did get a lot of guys. They drafted 11. Um, I'm just not huge on going the way the Niners did. Like, they kind of, like, fell in love with players and took them where they wanted them and just making sure they got their guys. And I'm not a fan of that because, like, I had sent you my, shadow draft and who I would have taken while the Niners were on the clock every single time. And I felt like the Niners could have had a much better draft and addressed every single need had they drafted where players fell to them instead of reaching for players where one of those ones where we see every year, right? The Niners overdraft the players every single year because they fall in love. Now, I know a lot of people will look at it as, oh, media didn't have Nick Martin so high. I was really high on Nick Martin. I told you and David that for a long time. Like, I was really high on Nick Martin. The issue is just because media is talking about players at certain spots, I think sometimes we see teams be a lot higher on those players. So, for example, like if I was to go and also go like talk to some of the teams and ask them, hey, where did you guys all have Nick Martin? My guess it's going to be around 100 to a little bit lower. That's just my guess. Niners took him at 75. To me, that's a little bit of a reach because you had the second pick. I think they could have got him on day 3. Niners do what they do. Kind of interesting they didn't address the offensive line, but my favorite player in this draft, Alfred Collins. I think Alfred Collins could do everything. Kind of reminded me a little bit when I was watching his tape of a guy in Kansas City. I don't like comping players and giving them comparisons to all pro players or players who are likely to be Hall of Famers. But when you
Right.
watch him, he's violent with his hands, has the length, plays strong. He knows how to shed and take on a double. There's multiple times where I've seen him take on triple teams, and he knows how to get skinny. And that's kind of hard to see when you're 6'6", 330 pounds, 340 pounds. So seeing that was pretty cool. Now I think he could get better as a pass rusher and learning how to use his hands a little bit more, learning how to attack half a guy and going that way. Um, but it's still, I felt like they could have had a better defensive line draft had they gone Walter Nolan with the first pick and then just let the draft fall to them. I feel like when you end up having to reach for a defensive tackle because a bunch of defensive tackles go off the board right before you, kind of felt like the Niners reached in a way. I do know they were really, really high on TJ Sanders. He went like a pick or two before them. So seeing
Mm-hmm.
them reach for Alfred Collins, Love the player, but again, you're reaching because I feel like they fall in love with players and they draft a certain way.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Michael Williams. We'll talk about some of the reaches here in a little bit, but Michael Williams, I think that there's a slight disagreement between you and I. So for me, I had 3 players once we got to the day, basically. I had 3 players that I was okay with the 49ers really taking, and it came down to Walter Nolan, Michael Williams, Jahdae Barron. I knew Jahdae Barron wouldn't be the pick. We knew that they were going to go trenches most likely. It's just what the 49ers do, and I'm fine with that. So it was either Walter Nolan or Michael Williams. Walter Nolan was my first choice. Don't get me wrong, but I had Michael Williams right there, and obviously a different position, so the evaluation is slightly different. You're not as big on Michael Williams as I am. What is it about Michael Williams that leaves you wanting more?
So I know you asked the question, but I'm gonna reply with a question because
Yeah.
this is where it becomes not necessarily about Michael. I think Michael's a really good player,
Yeah.
but answer to me real quick, Jesse. Who has Chris Kasarik developed on the defensive line since he's been here?
I mean, DJ Jones. Could we go with the Arden Key or a Minahu?
But did he
Been a
develop
while.
those guys, or did he bring those guys in, ask them to be effort guys, move them inside on third downs, and you get more production because they're athletic defensive ends matched up on guards, right? Like you didn't see Arden Key randomly get a bag of pass rush moves or
That's true.
Amenahue randomly get a bag of pass rush moves. So for me,
That's true.
when I'm looking, I love Chris Kasarik as a defensive line coach. That the energy, the motor that he expects players and he demands excellence from his team, right? But the thing is, I've never seen him develop a pass rusher. Truthfully, I
Mm,
never have. I cannot think of a player the Niners have drafted who they've developed as a pass rusher. Guys they get who have upside never pan out. That says something about coaching to me. Now, when you look at Michael, damn good run defender. A lot of times we see Michael in a situation where you're probably going to play him outside and kick him inside on pass rushing downs. But for me, it's the lack of development as a pass rusher in terms of having a go-to move is worrisome. You
mm,
went to Georgia, you should have developed at least a go-to move. We constantly see him get chest to chest with offensive linemen. He doesn't attack half the body. This is little things where it's like you get down to the small details on players. For example, Drake Jackson, the same way. He attacks the full body, tries to use pure strength. At the NFL level, everyone's strong. You're not just going to
mhm,
overpower dudes every single play in, play out. You're going to tire yourself out. So you got to have a go-to move. Um, I felt like a lot of times he was inconsistent when he would try to press and shed people at the point of attack. A lot of times he stands straight up. That to me is a pad level. It's an issue when it's coming to pad level. Now he has the intangibles you want for a defensive end for the 49ers. He has the length, he has the athleticism. I know a lot of people are like, oh, his get off is phenomenal. His get off is subpar. It's not great. So you're looking for something from an edge rusher opposite of Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is a technician. He's not a speed demon coming off the edge where you're going to like just straight win a rep right away. Well, you need that opposite of Nick Bosa. Truthfully, you do because that's Nick Bosa style. The Niners knew that before Nick Bosa. They've tried to replicate it with other players. They haven't. So for me, my biggest issue is the Niners haven't developed any pass rushers with Chris Kasarik. Michael Williams isn't a pass rusher. He's that run defender that you want to stop the run. Good thing is he's young. He has the athletic traits that you look for. Now my question is who's gonna develop him?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to who's he going to work with in the off seasons. Can he pick the brain of someone like Nick Bosa? I mean, it's one thing that people do forget is that Nick Bosa was a complete pass rusher by the time he entered the NFL. He had moves on moves on moves. He had moves, counter moves, and counters to those moves. That's pretty rare for a guy to come into the NFL like that. So to your point about development, Nick Bosa didn't need that development at all. It was there. He learned all that. He had everything in his bag ready to go. So yeah, Michael Williams is going to be different. I know that when you and I discussed this, my point that I brought up, and you brought it up here as well, which is early on, just kick him on the inside on third downs and allow him to manufacture at least a bull rush up the middle to maybe push that pocket so it muddies things up a little bit. But he is eventually going to have to develop those pass rush moves if he's going to be effective. You can't always just move him inside forever. That's not the answer to getting the best out of him. I do think that obviously we're talking about a young player with all the traits. He can learn it, but a lot of it is going to depend on him. One thing I do like, though, and I don't know if you saw this interview, but there was an interview he did, and he was asked about would he rather have. It was essentially the difference between like 40 million and $100 million contract. With $100 million contract, you get the money. $40 million contract, you get the Super Bowl. And he said, "Give me the 40 million in the Super Bowl." He said, "I'm about legacy. I want to make a legacy in this league." And I like that. I think that that's cool to hear. You can say that it's fodder or whatever, but for me, I like it when I don't think
Jesse,
young players think it through like that. I really don't.
you really think comes down to that situation, right? Let's say the
I don't know.
Niners
He'll take
offer
the
Mike
no, no, no,
out.
no, no, listen,
He's
listen.
gonna take the
He's gonna
money, bro.
take the bag and
That's
he's
a
gonna
good
want the bag.
PR. Like,
Yeah.
that's a good
He's
PR
going to want
answer.
the bag. I understand that. My point is though, is that just hearing that a Super Bowl is important to him is nice to hear because I don't think when just this is young people in general. Let's take NFL out of it. When you're young, you think about what's in front of you and living your life now. There's not a lot of forward thinking as a young person. And then as you get older and you realize your mortality, your mindset shifts. So for a young player to even be thinking Super Bowl before he's in the NFL, I do like that. Now, of course he's going to take the bag. Of course, if he's that good of a player, he's going to get every red penny from the 49ers. I'm not going to be here in 4 years going, "Guys, remember when he said he'll take a discount?" I am not that naive.
Well,
But
it's
the
kind of like
fact that he's
the Brock
already thinking
situation.
legacy is important to me.
It's kind of like the Brock situation. Remember when a lot of fans were like, "Oh, Brock's not greedy. He's not gonna want 60 million." Look at his character. That's the same situation, bro. Like,
Yeah.
bro, these players, they have a personality, but they have an agent for a reason, right? Like, they have an agent so they don't do that kind of stuff. So at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I think Michael has the right mentality, the right processing. Just for me, like, when I watched him, the get off isn't great. He's inconsistent as a pass rusher. He's not developed. Doesn't have that go-to move. I mean, you could say it's his long arm or his bull rush, speed to power, but you're not going to win like that throughout your entire career. So it comes down to, can you develop as a pass rusher? I didn't think he was the most complete player on the board at that point. I thought it was someone Arizona Cardinals took and Walter Nolan. So it's going to be fun to be able to compare
Yeah.
them over the next 4 to 5 years. For me, is just, again, like, can the Niners develop him? Can the Niners? I felt like if he would have gone to a team that just turns out defensive linemen year in, year out, like, I felt like, damn, like, he may be able to develop. It just, and also I also feel like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, and I forgot who brought it up, but they're like, oh, Michael's lane discipline um can be sacks, especially opposite of Nick Bosa, like having that lane discipline. I felt like he didn't have great pass rush integrity with and gap discipline against the run or sometimes on pass plays. So it's like, yes, he's a little inconsistent there, but if he could be consistent, have an effort of trying to be consistent in creating those cover sacks in terms of, and when I say cover sacks, more so like the gap integrity, I think it'll help out the 49ers defensive line. But for me, again, it's just a little bit of an undeveloped player at 11. But again, intangibles. It seemed like the Niners fell in love with intangibles. Someone they believe Chris Cassera could develop, but they've drafted a bunch of defensive linemen over the past few years that they felt that Chris Cassera could develop, and it just hasn't panned out for whoever they've drafted. So That concerns me a lot for the 49ers.
Okay, so we both agree that we wish it was not we wish. I'm fine with Michael actually, but we preferred Walter Nolan. You sounds like you wish it was Walter Nolan, but I preferred Walter Nolan, but it was close. So let me ask you this. If it's an edge rusher, would you have gone Michael Williams or Shamar Stewart? Who would you have preferred?
Oh, easily Michael Williams. I would have.
Okay, all right. I just
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
see where you're at on the spectrum here. Okay. Michael Williams or Jalen Walker?
Are we asking Jalen Walker to be a pure pass rusher?
Yeah, we're gonna assume that he's gonna do the Hassan Reddick thing and turn into a pass rusher in the NFL.
You're not. So we're doing this. So the question is year one, right away, we need a pass rusher. That's the question.
Not year one, just who I mean, okay, much like Michael Williams, where I'm not expecting him to be a finished product. I wouldn't expect that would be unfair for me to be like, well, Jalen Walker better be a finished product. So in your scenario, for me, I think Michael Williams to be at his best, they'll have to move him on the interior in front of guards as a pass rusher on third down. So maybe for Jalen Walker, he plays a little bit of linebacker and then kicks in to be a pass rusher on third downs, or however you see him used best early in his career. The ultimate point, though, is that they do want him to be an edge player as he progresses. So who would you have rather had?
I would lean Jalen Walker.
Okay.
I would lean.
Okay.
I know he's a smaller six. I like having certain traits for players when it comes to certain positions because of the fact, like when you look back at history, right? Like a lot of times history is going to tell you if you're this size, it's a lot harder to be successful in the NFL, right? 32-inch arms, only 6'1", but athletic freak, could probably play linebacker on early downs, a better pass rusher. I know you mentioned him as Hassan Reddick. I think he's more of a Nolan Smith than Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, that's
Smaller
fair.
guy,
Okay.
like who's a little more developed as a pass rusher coming out. I would lean Jalen Walker. But the thing is because you're going edge, right? For me, I think you can get quality players, even if it's inside, outside, and get production from defensive tackles at a higher rate. So, for example, I had sent you over my shadow draft. I would have gone, oh my goodness, I have
Walter
not
Nolan
recorded
and
in
then
so long.
Ezra in round 2.
Yeah, I haven't recorded in so long, so my brain farts are going to be fun today. So I would have gone, not Jalen Walker, Walter Nolan with the first, with the pick 11, and then I would have gone Donovan Easy, at the second pick. Now you're getting the best defensive tackle in the class, in my opinion, and then you're getting a really, really good edge rusher off the edge to get after the quarterback. That to me would have been a better duo than Mike Cal and Alfred, but I understand what the Niners are looking for. They wanted an edge setter first. I think Donovan could set the edge. I was thinking Walter Nolan on certain situations. If you want to put him outside, I think he could set the edge for you. So you could play Walter Nolan outside and inside. It all just depends on what you want them to do. But I would have
Right.
leaned Jalen Walker over Michael.
Okay. And then last one, I'm just thinking of edge rushers, James Pierce or Michael Williams.
James Pierce.
I know you love
And the
James
reason
Pierce.
is
I knew you were going to go that route.
reason is I felt like James Pierce was out of place at Tennessee. There's way too many times where I'm watching James Pierce and I'm seeing him drop into coverage on third down. Like, what are you doing? He's your best edge rusher. Why are we dropping him in coverage? I feel like if you let him put his hand in his dirt, you let him get after the quarterback and do his thing, stop the run. I think he's a better run defender than people gave him credit for. Now, I know the character concerns that teams or media was trying to put out there. I wasn't buying it. When it comes to character concerns, and the character concern is doesn't love football. Like, what's that? Like, yeah, unless you meet the player and you get to talk to him, I don't know how you can be like, oh, well, there's a character concern. If you don't meet the player, you don't talk to a player. How are we putting concerns on him? Unless it's something drastic, like my Green situation, then you could talk about the character concern because that's a serious character. Like, whoa. But I like where James Pierce went to Atlanta. It's going to be interesting seeing him and Jalen Walker in Atlanta, see what they do. good defensive coordinator to let them get after the quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay. Let me pull up these super chats real quick. Shady Luke says Michael is one of the few Georgia players in the past 3 to 4 years I have seen come out that people aren't talking about him with as much enthusiasm. Yeah, I think the league was higher on him than most people that were talking about the draft and what have you. I felt like the league would have had him as a top 15 pick, whether it was the 49ers or somebody else. But I don't know. To me, like Georgia players do this. It's really hard to draft some Georgia players because the production a lot of times is not going to be there. It's different. I'll give you an example. Georgia has a lot of really good players and they rotate them. They're not afraid. It doesn't matter if you're the best or the worst. You're a part of a unit and they rotate like crazy. Texas, a lot of people brought up Alfred Collins. They're like, well, how come he only has 1 year of really good production? Because he sat behind NFL ready players and Texas doesn't rotate like that. Texas just plays their oldest, best players. And when they move on, then it's your turn. And that's the way it was with Alfred Collins. It's not like he didn't play, but the amount that he played, if he'd gone to Georgia, you would have seen him in a rotation all the way through, and he would have played more right away, and he would have played less down the stretch because he would have been part of the rotation the whole time through. So it all depends on what colleges do. I don't get too wrapped up into that, but also with Georgia players, yeah, I mean sometimes the production's not there, but then they get to the NFL and it's pretty much been there for their high round lineman picks. They hit, all of them have hit in the first round as of late. So sometimes it takes time, sometimes it doesn't, but they do end up hitting. And you know best, Shady Luke, you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Your whole defensive line was revamped with Georgia players, and you had a 70 sack team 2 years ago. This defensive line was better because down the stretch, they actually made an impact when it mattered most.
And I think too, when it comes to players coming out of college, like looking at the production and the stats is the wrong way to go about it, right? Because you're
Yeah,
looking at a player who a lot of times you have players asked to do stuff they're not going to be asked to do at the NFL level, right? Like you're not going to ask Michael to play inside majority of his snaps
right.
with the 49ers. Like he's going to be setting the edge, he's going to be coming off the edge a lot, and then he'll bump into on third downs or key situations in a NASCAR package on third downs or whatever the case may be. So it's going to be a lot different than what we saw at Georgia. He's not going to be stopping the run from inside. It's going to be very different than what fans saw, and I think that's going to also like affect how well he plays, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that could go either way. It really could. Dave says, my brother Jesse out here laying it down for y'all. Appreciate you, Dave. And then Silence says, Alfred Collins and West will make it all right. I mean, that's one thing we can't deny is that the 49ers address the run defense with those with those three guys for sure. So we'll see how it plans out or pans out overall. Now, I know that we really dove deep into Michael Williams. You didn't hate Michael Williams. You just preferred something different. What's the one pick or multiple picks, I guess, if you have multiple that you're just like, "Ah, man, I wish they would have really done something different here." What is that for you?
I think when you look at it, like I wouldn't have taken Nick Martin. I would have addressed the offensive line. At some point, you got. I know you want to stop the run. The Niners did that with their first two picks. They helped their defensive run, their run defense with their first two picks. They got Michael. They got off Alfred Collins, two really good run defenders. Go offensive line, man. Like at some point, Trent's gonna retire. I know probably they got people were like, well, the Raiders might have taken their guys. There were still other good offensive guards. There were still other good players on the board. Like, so not going offensive line with Nick Martin and then Stout. I felt like they could have gotten a player there um, on the offensive line. Now the Niners tend to, and it's kind of been one of those ones where they're telling the fan base they believe in they believe in their offensive line. So now when it comes to looking at the 49ers, their draft history, what they're about, they don't care about drafting. They've been public about this. They don't care about drafting offensive line. They think they could develop offensive line. To me, that's pretty crazy. So, for example, with Nick Martin, two players I would have taken over him. I would have taken Siobhan Revel because I had a first round grade on him. He fell, whether that's knee injury, whatever the case may be. I would have taken a flyer on him, a cornerback that could get up in your face and press. That was a good pick by the Cowboys. Another guy, I know you're pretty. I think you might be high on this guard, Dylan Fairchild, going to the Bengals. I thought that was a really good pick for the Bengals in the third round. I thought that's the Niners have interior issues.
Did he go after Nick Martin?
He went like 4 picks after Nick Martin, I believe.
Oh my god!
So I want to say Nick Martin went with the 11th pick in the third round, and Dylan Fairchild went with the 17th. So 6 picks right after him. So like that to me is like, when are you going to address the offensive line? I know the fan base is always like, well, they could have won a Super Bowl but their offensive line. 2 years in a row they've said that, right? 2 Super Bowls in a row. So what point do you address? I know you could get guys who are sleepers in the draft at offensive line, but at some point you got to start addressing the offensive line earlier and make it a priority. If you look at certain teams who've won Super Bowls, their offensive line is always a priority. I don't know why the Niners don't want to make it a priority. Until they do, I think the Niners are going to struggle when it comes to playoffs. For example, I know we're going to talk about it later, but that Eagles defensive line, the Giants defensive line against the Niners, those defensive lines are going to make your offensive line work. They're going to make you have to go, and their offenses are good enough where they're going to put up points, or at least I'm not going to say Giants, but the Eagles offense is good enough where they're going to put up points where your offense is going to have to start throwing the ball. And I think that's where it becomes an issue. Offensive tackle, the swing tackle, I know they just signed somebody, but they have no offensive tackle of the future when Trent retires. That's within the next year or two.
No.
Center, Jake Brendel. He's still likely your starting center. You have a whole offensive guard. Ben Bartch hasn't played much. He's been a journeyman for his first couple of years, got drafted, cut, bounced around. So it's like, what do you really have on the offensive line? And I think that, to me, was the biggest miss of the draft is taking, for example, they took Nick Martin. Love the player. But if you take offensive line there, 5th round, what round did Smell, the kid from, was it Georgia?
5th.
Smell go.
5th. Smile Munden. He went 5th to the Eagles of all teams, of course.
A pick after the Niners took Marquez Siegel. So they could have taken him with their first pick when they took Jordan James. So you still could have eventually got a really, really good linebacker later in the draft. So for me, it's like the process of reaching for players, but not taking players who fill needs and are the better player at that spot, to me, was just a little confusing. And I felt like the Niners do this thing where they overreach for positions. And I see a lot of 49er fans like, oh, I love this draft. Lynch and Kyle killed it again. Whoa. So then when Brock Purdy's on his back often, or he's having to scramble often, and they're not able to push the ball down the field, they're not able to run the ball efficiently, come playoff time, if the offensive line is struggling, I know the NFL has an offensive line problem. Niners offensive line last year was average. It could have gotten better. I don't want to hear the fans who gave the Niners credit for this draft class without coming away with a starting offensive lineman, because there was guys in the 3rd round, there was guys in the 4th round and the 5th round that they could have taken that could have started for them. You could even go 2nd round. They could have taken an offensive lineman with that Alfred Collins pick, came back up, traded up. If you really loved Alfred Collins, trade back up and still get him. So for me, I don't want to hear anyone saying during the season, during the playoffs, or if they don't win the Super Bowl and it's because of the offensive line, saying Kyle and John need to address the offensive line because you guys praised this draft and they didn't take offensive line.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario because for me, I figured it out last night. I figured out what is the difference, and it's such a small difference. The difference between I gave them a B- and if I'd given them an A. So I'm going to give you the same scenario and see if you feel the same way. So the linchpin of this draft was Martin at 75. Okay. And everybody agrees, good player. Most people agree, reach. Okay. Both can be true. And I think what backs up the reach is the fact that there was a 58 pick span between what went before him, 26 picks before him, 32 picks after him, where no other linebacker was taken. Okay. He was the only linebacker in a 58 pick span. If Nick Barton wasn't taken there, he would have been there at 100. He just would have been. So let's look at it this way. Instead of taking Nick Martin at 75, they take an offensive lineman, whoever that is, whoever was their guy. You can insert, your guy if you think it's Dylan Fairchild, whoever. Okay. They take an offensive lineman. Then they take Nick Martin at 100 instead of 75. They still get CJ West at 113. And then at 138, instead of taking Jordan Watkins, they get Upton Stout. So they get all the same players, except for they don't get Jordan Watkins, the receiver, and they get Nick Martin a pick later, so that gives them an offensive lineman. Would that have completely changed the way that you viewed this draft?
Yeah, it would have, in the sense of you're still getting the same players where they should have been drafted, in my opinion. Now, again, a lot of times, a lot of fans are going off of in what media or what they're seeing, right? Not what the NFL thinks. So these teams,
Right.
they talk to other scouts, like they have their scouts. Hey, talk to this scout. Hey, well, where would you have him going? Like what pick, what round? So they get like a consensus, kind of like from other scouts and other teams too. Like it's kind of like they're not supposed to, but they still talk to each other. I would have had a different grade on it. Right now, this draft, I have it as a C minus, C plus range. Like I can't give you more than that, because you don't address the offensive line when that's been a big weakness. You're gonna draft Jordan. You drafted Jordan James, right? The running back they took from Oregon. Yep. They drafted Jordan James a year after they took Isaac Guerendo. Is that them admitting that they missed on Isaac Guerendo? Is that them admitting that, hey, Isaac Guerendo has an injury history? He was injured his whole rookie year, injured in college. Is that them admitting that they missed on the pick? Go Jordan Watkins. Is that them admitting that they missed on either Ricky Pearsall or Jacob Cowing, who they also drafted in the 4th round? So, like, at what point do we look at it and like, whoa, you just took players at those set positions last year? Why aren't they going to be given a true shot year 2? And you're doubling up on those positions, knowing that you have holes at other positions on your team. Like, to me, that just didn't make sense. I feel like that's kind of a them admitting. That's just me just reading between the lines. I feel like they're admitting that, hey, we might not have hit on Ricky Pearsall or Jacob Cowing, which is fine. Like, if you admit it, that's fine. But they constantly do that almost every single year, Jesse. Like, it's became a trend.
Here's the thing, is that they did need a running back. For me, we'll see how it plays out. If Jordan James beats out Guerendo, then that's where the issue kind of comes in, because you traded up for Guerendo and got him around earlier and traded up to do so. So, yes, you needed another running back, but the hierarchy better be Guerendo over James. Otherwise, you are kind of admitting that. Now, I want to bring this up real quick. Steve-O says, make a chart of how accurate big boards are. I dare you. In what sense? How accurate they are as far as what the picks are or whatever? I showed multiple charts showing it doesn't matter how accurate big boards are, but the teams that stick closest to the big boards actually historically have the better drafts. That's raw data that I've presented multiple times. So we can say what we want about, oh, the big board's this, or make a big joke about it. But the reality is the teams that stick to it closest have the better drafts. And that's years and years of data. So no, big boards aren't going to be accurate. But one thing that we can do is, and I said that, David does it a lot. I know that you do it as well, Marco. You do the shadow drafts afterwards. Hey, this is what I would have done.
I usually try to do it when the players, when they're on the clock.
Right, when they're on the clock. Exactly.
Like I would, like, and I write it down. I text it to you guys. I text it to a lot of my buddies. I would have taken this set player, because at that point, like, I don't want to go back and like, well, let me take another look.
Yeah. Because who fell and who didn't. Yeah. That's fair. You do it when we're on the clock. Either way, but you stick closer usually to big board. Not always. Sometimes you have things ranked different, but it's going to be a lot closer to big board, and it usually works out pretty dang good. It's to me like there is a science to it. It's not an exact science. I understand that, but man, everybody seems to agree. The 49ers do their own thing. They clearly have their own evaluation system that does not jive with what a lot of the league does. And you look at it and you start looking at teams across the board, and the 49ers are consistently widely different from the big board than the rest of the teams. That tells you that they just view things differently. And I think we can all agree. And again, when you pull up a chart of their biggest reaches according to the big board, those players are all buns. So what are we talking about? Like, why? How can we say all the big board's BS when it actually plays out? We have the data. So I don't know. The whole big board argument and trying. Oh, I mean, if they pan out, they pan out. Well, they haven't. They haven't panned out. So why would we think all of a sudden that they would now? That doesn't make any sense.
You bring up a
Shady
point real
Luke.
quick that I want to reply to, because you said that it kind of seems like the Niners do their own thing when it comes to the big board. We heard John Lynch and Kyle talk about multiple times allowing their coaches to have heavy influence on who they draft. And I feel like that's kind of messed up to the coaching staff in a way, because when you look at what the 49ers do, right? You have your coaches year in prepping, whether if it's prepping for the season, during the season, they're prepping for each game. They don't get the full ability to go out and scout all these players and be able to fully watch. Like, I know they could sit there and they could grind right after the season and try to watch as many players as you can. But these scouts and these executives that are actually high up are going to games weekly, watching their film weekly, going back, watching years, not just one season, years of these players.
Yep.
And when you're putting a coach in a scenario of who do you want? Who fits your system? It's cool. Like they need to fit the system, but why can't we adjust the system to the player at times? Why can't you as a coach draft a player who is extremely good and tell your coach, I got you this player. He is the best player at this position. Figure out how to make him fit your system. Figure out how to adjust, whether you have to go away from the wide nine, whether, Kyle, if you have to go away from outside zone, inside zone, and go a little bit more gap at times and go duo at times. Like, you can do it. And like, I feel like at some point, the 49ers need to understand, yes, ask the coach, hey, can you give me your top players? But you're not going strictly off what the coaches want. And I felt like Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch this past draft multiple times have said, we allowed our coach to influence this pick. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at as well. Does John trust his eye? Like, truthfully, does he trust his eye? If he's continually asking his coaching staff, who do you want? Does he trust what he sees?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. And the thing is too, is it's not, to me, it's like, okay, the players are one thing, but it's just knowing what the rest of the league is looking at and understanding that. I mean, I put together my 3 picks that I would have made at every pick. There's a video out there, so everybody can go cross-reference this. This is not an after the fact thing. I did a video for Bleacher Report. I posted it here. It was way more accurate as to far as who was going to be available at those picks than what the Niners were doing. It was pretty obvious that in this, I'm going off of mock drafts and big board and all these other things. These are the 3 players that I think could be there. This is who I would choose between. This is who I like, what have you. It's not perfect, but it was a lot closer in evaluation to what the 49ers ran with. So it's just more, and it's not, this is not me saying, oh, I'm smarter than the Niners. That is not it. All I'm asking for, or what I would hope for, is that you understand what the rest of the league thinks of these players for the most part. And it happens all the time. We always get the footage at some point in the offseason of X team, and they're like, okay, so-and-so is going to draft so-and-so. So-and-so is going to draft so-and-so. And then that leaves this player and this player could be going to the Colts. Then we're on the board. We should be able to get our guy X here. And they're right. Oh, yep, that guy went there. That guy went there. This guy went there. Yep, we nailed it. It's how come everybody else in the league has an idea of what is possible, but the 49ers seem to be out in la la land like, oh my, I had no idea that those guys that we wanted at 100 weren't going to make it to us. It's, you got to know where they're going to go. I have no problem with Nick Martin being taken, but at 75, the rest of the league told you that that's a reach. 58 picks. There was no linebacker taken except for Nick Martin. And Nick Martin was not the best linebacker available. He just wasn't. So for him to be the one guy to go, again, if the 49ers had gone offensive line there, Nick Martin would have been there at 100. He would have been, period.
And I think, too, like when you look at like other teams' draft, like, for example, I'm going to bring up the Eagles. They wanted a linebacker. Like, they wanted to trade up. Like, there's multiple times where it came out where, like, Eagles are trying to move up. They ended up getting the best linebacker in this draft, staying pat. Like, that, to me, is crazy. The fact that they could have moved up to get the best linebackers when he started falling to the early 20s. Instead, they realized, wait, whoa. No other team's going to go linebacker. No one's trying to trade up for him. Stay pat, get the best player. I feel like the Niners could have done that throughout this draft where you stay pat, get the best player. So it's just interesting. I think at the end of the day, the players could end up being good, which we've seen in the past. But I still think where you drafted them also matters. Like, I think that really does matter.
Right. I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, I was the year that Purdy came out, I had a third round evaluation on him. And I remember early on in the process, I was like, why am I able to get him in the 7th round of these mocks? I'm like, it'll adjust. It always adjusts. And you notice when you're doing these mock drafts throughout the offseason, they start adjusting wildly. There's players that you were getting late. All of a sudden, they're going in round 3, they're round 2. And you're going, that's a big adjustment from where they were. And usually that's pretty dang close with what ends up happening. It's like you look at Walter Nolan, for example. At one point in drafts, he was going in the you could get him at 43 for the 49ers. And then it was, he's a top 12 prospect, and he ends up going 16. They adjust and they get it pretty close. Brock Purdy ended up being a dang good player. But if I was drafting and I had a 3rd round evaluation on him and took him in the 3rd round when I could have had him in round 7, that would have been asinine. The rest of the league would have laughed at me. Dude, you could have had him 4 rounds later. Why'd you waste the pick there? If you really loved him, you could have gotten him at 252. You didn't need to do that. That's stupid. So it's not about just getting good players. It's about getting good value on those players. And that's where I think the 49ers get a mix up. It's not that they get bad players all the time. They do hit on a lot of their players, but they also have some gnarly reaches like Cam Latu, like Jake Moody. I mean, we can go up and down the line. Like every running back they took in round 3. How about that? Or Ambry Thomas. Those were reach picks that they didn't need to take and shouldn't have taken. And if TDP, for example, who was taken in round 3, was projected more to be a 5th round back, if they had taken him in round 5, who cares? It's a 5th round pick. Those guys don't hit ever. But because they got him in round 3, it's a major miss. So that's the difference. That's the difference in when you hit on a player, getting even more praise, and when you miss on a player, it being a big deal or not being a big deal based on where you got them. And that's really what it comes down to.
No, and it's comes down to like when for example, I want to say you brought it up. Had the Niners taken George Kittle in the 2nd round when they drafted George Kittle, people would have been like, whoa, what are they doing? They took George Kittle in the 2nd round when nobody had him mocked to the 2nd round ever. Like, that would have been a big deal, right? Like, teams play a lot of Niner fans, but the fact that he hit as a 5th rounder is one of the biggest steals in the draft. Well, no, it's not you could look at it as a steal, but he went where he was supposed to go. Like, so yeah, it eventually was a steal, but he went where he was supposed to go in the draft. But we can move on to the next topic, or else we'll just talk about how the Niners constantly reach.
Shady Luke says that's a very interesting point, Jay. Now that you say that, I see Bama and Georgia players are like that. You're right. That was going back to taken a while to develop, but they always end up hitting. Joseph Ernberg says, we address O-line when Kyle leaves. Nice hat, Jesse. Thank you. Appreciate you. Hopefully we address it before that. Shady Luke says, have faith in Lynch and Shanny. They will give y'all a high O-line pick. I cried for years for Howard to take a bunch of SEC players. Now look at him. Yeah, that's a good point. Shady Luke says, I'm not a Niners fan. Explain this to me, though. Why do some Niner fans act like the Niners couldn't or weren't able to select an offensive line? I'm so confused by that. They do that to protect the team. It's all about, what are you comfortable talking about? What are you comfortable being critical about? And what are you going to do to go out of your way to protect that team? I'll give you an example. All season long, when I said the offensive line is not as bad as people want to make it out to be, you look at all the rankings, they're around 12, 13. All season long, I got pushback for that because people wanted to protect Brock Purdy. Now here we are in the offseason, and those same people are vouching for the 49ers not taking an offensive lineman after losing two guys who contributed a lot to them, and Banks and Moore, because they want to protect the 49ers. So it's all about what you're comfortable being critical about, and are you consistent? So most people just aren't consistent with their conversations around this.
So I'm watching the Warriors game on the second screen. They were down 30 points. They put their backups in to like just give everyone a rest in the fourth quarter. Like, obviously you're not going to win this game. Bro, they're down 13 points. Make it, oh, well, it was almost 10, but they're down 13 points with 5 minutes left because of the backups. I swear, if they come back and win this game with backups against the Rockets starters, it's going to be insane.
That'd be hilarious. How many points did Curry get? Because I was on with Grant yesterday, and I told him that Curry wasn't going to get his 26 because he would get pulled in the fourth quarter because they were going to lose the game.
Now they're trying to fight. That's crazy.
They put
no, Curry,
back?
TD, Jackson Davis and Sengun are going at it. No, but Curry for sure didn't get 26. I know he was struggling.
Yeah.
I think the highest scorer on the Warriors is like 15.
Yeah, I figured it was just they didn't need to win the game. You just got to be able to tell. Like NBA players or NBA teams, they're not going to, when they're up like that, they usually lose those games. Just the way it works.
Can I answer that Eagles fans question real quick?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yep.
I'm gonna ask everyone in the chat, including you, Jesse. Who has the best offensive line in the NFL right now?
Oh, there's a few teams, but
give me your top
Eagles,
three.
Cool,
Eagles. You said Eagles. That's all I needed.
Lions.
You said
okay.
Eagles.
All right. Okay.
That's all I needed. So the Eagles, if you look at the Eagles draft, yes, they have the best offensive line in the draft, and one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. They still managed to take 3 offensive linemen in this past draft, 1 in the 5th, 2 in the 6th. And people were arguing that the Niners didn't or couldn't have to go offensive line.
They took 3 offensive linemen before the 49ers took 1. And they already have one of the top offensive lines, is what you're telling me.
Yes. So when we look at that, that tells me keep a strength a strength. Make a strength and keep it there. So if the Eagles, who have one of the best offensive lines, are going offensive line before the 49ers, that says a lot, man. It says you truly value the offensive line because you know if with the good offensive line, your quarterback has more time, you have better running lanes, your offense is going to be better just no matter what. It really is. The Niners don't care about their offensive line. It's plain as out there. Go back to every draft. The Niners have made it a point, and they've said in the past, we believe we could take guys in the 5th and on and develop them and have a good offensive line. So that's why we take skill guys who put the ball in the end zone over offensive linemen. They have a flawed drafting mentality, Jesse. The Eagles just won a Super Bowl because of their offensive line and defensive line. And they took more offensive linemen and took them before the 49ers even took 1. That to me says a lot.
Well, Tom Brady talked about this last offseason, and I talked about it then, and I'll bring it up again now. He was on with Cowherd, and they were talking team philosophy, team building, what have you. Tom Brady's words were, you show me a team with an elite offensive line, and I'll show you a team that's competing for a Super Bowl. That was what he said. And then he said, if you don't have the offensive line and the quarterback, then you better be elite everywhere else and not Not like elite where you have some good. No, you better be the best at every other position group if you want to compete. And when you look at the Niners, that's kind of what they've done. They were able to get to those Super Bowls because they had the Fred Warners, the Nick Bosas. They had elite defensive lines. They had elite linebackers. They had elite secondary. They had elite weapons. And then they had the okay offensive line and the okay quarterback with potentially an elite head coach. I mean, we can argue about that all day long, but they had to be pretty much elite everywhere just to pick up those units. Now that they're not elite in those areas, if you continue to be a mediocre offensive line, that's going to hurt. It's going to, and you can't do this thing what the 49ers had to do this year with the defensive line, where it seems like they got lucky and were able to build out their whole starting defensive line in one draft, but all those players have to hit. If one of those guys don't hit, their defensive line is still way worse than what it needs to be a competitive team. If all those guys hit, then they're going to be fine. But now you're in a position where you're likely going to have to do the same thing next year, but with offensive line. And that's just not a way to go. You have to this takes years to build. You're going to have misses. That is normal to miss in the draft, but you're putting yourself in a situation where none of those picks can be misses. Alfred Collins, CJ West, and Michael Williams, they all have to hit. They have to hit. If one of those guys misses or two of those guys miss, all bets go out the window, and this defensive line could be in shambles again in 2 years. So that you just can't live that way, man. You cannot. Dave says, what did I dislike? Lyle's picks. He needs UDFAs only. Shady Luke says, Roseman said Andy taught him the value of the trenches. Well, that's it. I mean, Andy was an offensive line coach, right? An offensive line man himself. So he does understand the value of trenches. Okay, let's talk about, did the 49ers close the gap? And we'll just go with division. If we branch out from there, great. But going into this draft, going into this offseason, the 49ers were last place in the NFC West. So they have some room to make up. You look at what the Cardinals have done. You look at their draft. They had Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, Jordan Birch, Cody Simon, Denzel Burke, Hayden Connor, and Keaton Crawford. Who do you think had a better draft, the Niners or the Cardinals?
I personally think the Cardinals did. I think especially because when you look at Walter Nolan, I had him graded higher than Michael. If Will Johnson's knee is right, they got a top 15 player in the second round. Now, Jordan Burt, he could be I know the Niners wanted a guy who could play outside, set the edge, kick inside. Jordan Burt could do that. Like Jordan Burt, and you're an Oregon Ducks fan, you know he could set the edge outside, kick inside, and get after the quarterback. That's kind of his game, in my opinion. So when you get those three picks off the bat, you could say, oh, well, if Will Johnson's knee isn't right, he's not going to be a good player. But it's a second round pick for a top 20 graded player consensusly. It's the knee that is the reason why he fell. They end up taking a cornerback and a linebacker later. So I really do like what the Arizona Cardinals did there. Really, really good draft, especially if Will Johnson's knee is right.
Yeah, you know what I like too about it is that they took Denzel Burke late. Denzel Burke at one point was supposed to be second or first round pick himself, and then he fell off throughout this whole process. But he's kind of the insurance in case Will Johnson doesn't pan out. It's like, okay, well, if Will Johnson doesn't, then maybe Denzel Burke will, and the draft class is saved. But I really did like what they did. They went into the draft with, I think, 6 picks, and they left with 7. So they ended up getting one in every round. So they were able to pick up an extra pick. And we talk about value. So the 49ers on average reached, according to Consensus Big Board, on average, 40 spots in their draft per pick. 40 spots per pick. The Cardinals were the only team in the division that actually brought value of 1 spot. So not reaching 1 spot, they were 1 spot ahead on average for their picks throughout the draft, which is pretty sweet as well. And I think that they did a really, really good job. And when I coupled that with their offseason, I mean, talk about revamping a defensive line. They needed to do so. They already revamped it with the free agents they brought in, and then they went and got Burch and Nolan to make sure that they revamped that thing. So you talk about depth, man. They revamped it, and then they got the depth in the draft. That defensive line is completely different than what it was last year. We're not even talking close to the same unit.
And I think too, when you look at Walter Nolan, a lot of people are like, "Oh, character concerns, lazy, this, X, Y, Z," right? All these things started coming out on him. You know who gets to mentor him? Calais Campbell. One of the best pros, true pros in the NFL gets to mentor him. That is the perfect guy to mentor somebody like Walter Nolan. And I would not be surprised if Calais Campbell continues to mentor him after he retires this year. And I think that pick may come back to haunt the Niners. It really may come back to haunt the Niners.
Yeah, man. I'm curious to see what happens with Walter Nolan's career. I have a debate going with the Seahawks and the Rams content creator that I do the NFC West roundtable on. They think they don't like him. Neither of them like him. I love Walter Nolan, so I'm curious to see how it plays out over the years. It'll be a fun conversation for one of us. Maybe not me. They might be right. Okay, let's talk Seahawks real quick. They went with Gray Zabel, Nick Imanwari, Elijah Arroyo, Jalen Milroe, Riley Mills, Torrey Horton, Robbie Oots, Bryce Cabaldu, Damian Martinez. I know you love that pick, especially in the 7th round. Mason Richmond, and then Ricky White. What did you think of the Seahawks draft?
I thought the Seahawks draft was solid. I felt like they didn't have to, they didn't reach for anyone. I really loved Gray Zabel before even the Senior Bowl. I had him as my top center heading into the Senior Bowl. He may get a shot to play center. He may end up playing guard. They got Nick in the 2nd round after trading up. A lot of people had a 1st-round grade on him. Super athletic, 6'3", fits what McDonald wants to do over there. Kind of gives him this Kyle Hamilton of the
that's
Seattle
what
Seahawks.
I was thinking. Yeah,
Elijah Arroyo, really good tight end as a route runner. But I think this draft class is going to be focused on, does Jalen Milroe develop and does he hit? I think if he hits and he develops, getting him in the 3rd or 4th round, wherever they got him, that may be the deciding factor on how great this draft class is for him. Because when you look at Jalen Milroe, a lot of the talk was he was one of the few players who broke himself down when they asked to break him down, and he was extremely critical of himself.
I heard about
what
this.
He's working on, what he's doing, and he was like, "You would be insane to be sitting here as a college player coming into the NFL and not want to critique who you are as a player." And I thought that was pretty cool to see. So I think Jalen Milroe may be the deciding factor on this draft class, and if he hits, watch out, because he has really high upside. He has the legs, the mobility. He also, honestly, they may use him in certain situations on kind of how the Saints have used their mobile quarterback Hill.
Yeah,
they may use him in that role to start early, kind of give him a little bit of passing situations, but mainly as a runner. And that's going to be interesting to see Jalen Milroe how he develops.
Yeah, I mean, they essentially traded Geno Smith for Milroe. I mean, that was basically the trade. So because they got Geno, they traded him for a 3rd, I believe, and then they drafted Milroe in the 3rd. So that was essentially it. And I agree, it comes down to Milroe. If he ends up panning out, then they knocked this thing out of the park most likely. I gave them a B. I think the Cardinals had the best draft in the division. I gave them a B+. I gave the Seahawks a B. Arroyo, I don't know. I like things about Arroyo, but he's also injured. I'm kind of iffy on him. I love the Zabel pick. Imanwari, I wasn't big on Imanwari early in the process, but a lot of it is where you go. And for him to be with McDonald, I think that's the perfect spot, because McDonald clearly sees this is my Kyle Hamilton. So I like that. Horton, I think, is a steal potentially in round 5. That's a really, really good prospect. So for them, they reached on average of 18 total spots. Really, what blew it for them was a 7th round pick that they had. That was a reach by 200 spots. I think in the 7th round, whatever, get who you want to get. So that's kind of where they lost it. Otherwise, if you pull that out, they're very close to consensus themselves. Overall, I gave them a B. They ended up with as many picks as the 49ers. I believe they had 11 picks as well. So, all right. This was the most interesting one for me, was the Rams. Now, remember, the Rams got that first round pick from the Falcons next year. So that has to factor into this. But their first pick in the draft ended up being 46th overall, 14th in the second round. They got Terrence Ferguson, tight end out of Oregon. Then in round 3, they got Josiah Stewart, Jarquez Hunter, Ty Hamilton, Chris Paul they got in round 5, and then Kanata Mumfield, wide receiver out of Pittsburgh. What did you think of the Rams draft?
I thought the Rams draft was pretty interesting because you get that first round pick for the future, right?
Right.
We know with Matthew Stafford coming to the end of his career, that extra pick in a deep 2026 draft class may be very, very valuable, especially if the team, like let's say the New York Giants who have Jackson Dart, if they're picking top really, really early next year, or a team who has their quarterback in place is picking early, you could package 3 to 4 first rounders because of that extra first rounder and use it as like extra currency. Really, Ferguson, I really like him out of Oregon. I think he's a really good tight end, a little bit underrated as a blocker. I mean, not the greatest blocker on in line, but a good route runner, good passing threat for Matthew Stafford. Wasn't crazy on Josiah Stewart. I thought he should have gone a lot later. But I understand what they're trying to do, their process. I thought they overdrafted him, but their process is to get somebody opposite of Verse. And I like the thinking. I wouldn't have gone him personally in that 3rd round. There was a lot of other edge rushers I preferred. Going running back there in the 4th. I'm not I don't really care when it comes to running backs, but my favorite pick of their draft was 2 players in the 5th, Ty Hamilton and Chris Paul Jr. I thought Ty Hamilton should have gone a little bit higher. I think he's a really good run defender, gets under blocks. I think he's going to give them a good complementary piece to Fisk. So that's going to be fun to see. And then Chris Paul, a lot of people like Chris Paul ahead of Nick Martin. So it's another guy you can compare Chris Paul to Nick Martin for the next couple of years. So it'll be interesting. They do need linebackers. Their linebacking room, Omar Spates, solid player.
Mm-hmm.
So see what they bring. But their draft class, it wasn't like nothing crazy, but it was for the future, in my opinion. I think they took that extra pick and like, hey, our class might not be as good this year, but we're going to have that extra first rounder to trade up and get our quarterback next year, whether that's Drew Alar, whether that's Lenoris Sellers, whoever it is next year. They may get their quarterback and they may not have a fall off from quarterbacks over the next couple of years after Matthew Stafford retires.
Yeah, their draft was interesting for me. The Chris Paul one is really interesting because not my favorite linebacker, but you get him at pick 172. Him and Nick Martin had pretty similar measurables. They got him 100 picks later, so I am curious to see what ends up happening with that. Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. Obviously, I love the Oregon Ducks. Terrence Ferguson, we had a lot of talks this offseason about him as a prospect. I like Terrence Ferguson, but that was certainly a reach for me. And then you add in the fact that he got hit near his knee at some point early last year and stopped playing aggressive. He was very timid. He started dropping the ball a ton. He was a shorthanded player for his whole career. 3rd downs, you could throw him anywhere near him and he would bring it in with contested catches, what have you. And then all of that went away. And so it does make me wonder, are they getting damaged goods with Ferguson? Was he hurt? And so he was trying to protect himself? Or was it a mental thing where he's now got a fear of being hit low? And so now he just isn't catching the ball and playing the way he used to. I don't know the answer to that, but I would be concerned about that a little bit. When I look at their actual draft, again, they only had 6 picks. You didn't have a pick until pick 46. You're not necessarily going to hit a home run. That's the team that I look at and say, I think the rest of the division closed the gap a little bit on the Rams through this draft. Now, obviously, if we factor in the offseason, they got Devontae Adams. They're still the best team in the NFC West, in my opinion. But we're talking about this year's draft. I think all three of the other teams in the NFC West had a clear better draft than them. I did give them a higher grade than the 49ers only because they got a first-round pick next year, and that has to factor in. But as far as the players that are contributing this year, I would have given them like a C, C minus. That trade was an A plus 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 plus. You combine them together, that puts you at about a B. But I don't think that they're going to be a whole bunch better based off of who they got in this draft, is my guess. But we'll see.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at the 49ers draft class in closing the gap in the division, right? And I had sent this to you earlier regarding closing the gap. I felt like the Niners did close the gap in the division. And when you look at it, the division doesn't have a great defensive line. Right. So their offensive line doesn't play a huge factor when it comes to the division. When you look at the Rams, you could argue they probably have the best defensive line in the division with Fisk, Verse, really good, like the depth that they have there with what's the other dude who is really underrated. Oh my god, I'm drawing blank.
They got Puna Ford.
But no, they have a guy who's in his third year. Why can I not think of his name? It might be Brown. Let me go ahead and I'll tell you exactly his name.
Byron Young. Was it Byron Young?
No, Kobe Turner. I think Kobe Turner is underrated. I think he's so underrated as a defensive tackle. So you have three really good players, plus you could have Byron Young, and then their depth. Their defensive line might give the Niners the most fits. So I'm looking at the Niners like not addressing offensive line. Okay, I get it. Your division doesn't have a big depth-wise defensive line group.
Well, they do now with between Arizona. I don't know, man. I'm looking at all three of them right now. Seattle's got some good depth. Arizona's now got some good depth. And the Rams have top-end talent and good depth. So I don't all right.
I think it's not one of the, it's not the Eagles defensive line. It's not the Giants defensive line. It's not like defensive lines that's going to give you fits every single play. Those two teams, I feel like the Giants defensive line might be the best defensive line in the league on paper. Like that defensive line is
on paper, it is the best defensive line. Yeah, I agree.
So when you look at the night, like on paper, like yes, they have like depth and stuff, but it's not elite defensive line. So you could get away with having a lesser offensive line. And then you get better on the defensive line to stop the run. The Rams want to do is run the ball, go play action. Arizona Cardinals, same thing. They want to run the ball, go play action with Kyler Murray. And then having Sam Darnold, if you are able to stop the run and you put Sam Darnold in third and long situations, we saw what happened with Sam Darnold. So I felt like the Niners did close the gap within the division. The issue is you don't play the division to get to the Super Bowl, Jesse. To get to the Super Bowl, you got to play really good defensive line in the Eagles. Other teams in the NFC, I felt like have gotten better defensive lines. So for me, I think, yes, you closed the gap within the division, but I don't think you closed the gap in the NFC at all. Truthfully, I don't. Yes, you got better, but how much better are rookie players, Michael, CJ West, who we haven't really talked about, Alfred Collins versus Leonard Floyd, Malik Collins, and Javon Hargrave? How much better are they going to be as rookies than those three defensive linemen that the Niners let go this offseason? I think that, to me, now in the long term, I think they're going to be a lot better. But as rookies, I don't think they're going to be as like that much better to say, wow, they really closed the gap in the entire NFC.
Yeah, I think relying on a whole unit to be played by rookies is a little unfair to those rookies. I mean, that's one thing that I hope people have is patience, because if for some reason, I think what 49er fans are expecting is the 49ers immediately out the box with this draft, day one, have a top 3 run defense. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think long term, we're talking about an elite run defense potentially if these guys pan out. And I love Love all the picks. Don't get me wrong. I love all those guys. I praised every single one of those picks. But to expect that day one out the box, if it happens, great. I just think that's an unrealistic expectation to put on them. And I worry that a lot of 49er fans will be like, oh, those, they're bums and they're this and they're that. You got to have patience with young players. And even if they start out great, much like Dom Pooney last year, they do often end up hitting a wall. And that happened with Dom Pooney a little bit. He regressed a little bit down the stretch. That's normal. That's completely normal for rookies. So this to me is about building long term. If they can make that immediate impact, great. If not, I'm not going to trip too much because I don't necessarily expect them to just come out the gate and be elite right away. I think that's an unfair expectation.
Super unfair expectation. You're gonna have fans really going at these players because they're expecting them to be elite out the gate, and you're most likely gonna play 4 to 5 rookies on defense. Like, yes, they're led by Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, so you could get away with having some rookies throughout the defensive line and linebacker and stuff like that. But they're gonna have their mistakes. They're gonna have their learning curves. They're gonna get bullied at times. And I think the Niners fan base needs to understand that. And I think the Niners need to understand that as well. It's, truthfully, your offense has to be the leader of this team. Like you're getting ready to pay Brock. So I mean that may be the thing. Like, hey, you know what? We got to get a really good defense for the future because we know get a lot of young defensive players because we understand that we're gonna pay Brock. That's gonna price us out of a lot of defensive players in free agency in a couple of years. So we got to get that right now. So it's going to be really interesting. I think the Niners have a really good, I think Alfred Collins, I think, like I said, I think he may be the best draft pick when it's all said and done for the 49ers.
Yeah, I'll take it. As long as they're all good, that'd be great. Shady Luke says Zona is sneaky good. Yeah, man, I think they did a really good job. To me, it all comes back to Kyler, man. There's something I wanna think that Kyler's a really good player, but there's something missing, man, and it's been missing. So unless all of a sudden he's gonna tap into this missing piece, that's what Arizona hinges on. So we'll see. Trip Aces, he wasn't the only one. A lot of people were talking about the purple 49ers hat. It's actually blue. It's the blue here and here is identical. I don't know why this shows up purple. But my quarterback from I coach a flag football team, my son's flag football team, and our quarterback got this for me at the end of last season is a thank you for being his coach. So shout out to Dean. Cool. I rock it for him. Joseph Ernberg says we are easily the worst in the West. 5-12. Here we come. I don't think so. I still think the 49ers can get to 10 wins and make the playoffs. That's my expectations for them. They should get to the playoffs, and we'll see how it plays out.
I think it comes down to health.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
Like it just comes down to health. Like if and more so, not necessarily health. I'm going to say one player. It comes down to one player's health. In my opinion, it comes down to Christian McCaffrey's health. That's just the one thing. Like if he's back and himself.
Well, that's the second part is the more important part. It's one thing to be healthy. It's one thing to be you. And can he tap into 2 years ago Christian McCaffrey even if he's healthy? I question that. I mean, I think there's a possibility that he could be healthy and play, but he's not 27-year-old Christian McCaffrey. That wouldn't be shocking either. So you've got to hope for two things. One, he's healthy. Two, he's his old self. And we'll see about that. I think that there's a coin flip on those things happening. I do. And that's
we got people rough. In the chat predicting the Niners in the Super Bowl this year. That's crazy.
No, I saw that. It's pretty funny. Stevo Supremo says it depends on where you go unless you're the Niners. That's not true. That's why I said that we like Nick Martin, not necessarily where he was picked, but the fit of him being here. He's talking specifically about me saying that Emanwari is a fit with Seattle. Let's also not forget that was 5 picks value. That wasn't a 75 pick reach either. So we're talking about where he should have gone. In fact, slightly behind where he should have gone. And also, by the way, it's a perfect fit. So, those
you could even look at with Nick going to Seattle. Like people either had him mid-teens to early second. So
Mhm.
them getting him in the second, it's not like they took a player who was supposed to go
For
in the
sure.
fifth in the second. So like they got good value for a player who fits the defense. And like if the Niners had gotten Nick Martin in the fifth round, everyone's like, oh my god, the Niners got a steal. That's what the conversation would be because a lot of people are expecting him to be good. I think it's going to be interesting with how the 49ers bring him on. Do you throw him into the fire right away? He's a third round pick. He should be playing pretty soon. Or did they miss on D winners? Are they admitting they missed on D winners 3 years ago? Going into year 3, did
Yeah,
they miss on him?
absolutely. And then 49ers Empire, listen, bud, we're in April, a random Wednesday in April on a 49ers channel to come in and say that a bunch of people watching 49ers content in April on a Wednesday are fake. I don't know who died and made you the king of 49ers fandom. Having a name that says 49ers Empire doesn't make you more of a special fan than anybody. I've got season ticket holders in here. I got guys that spend a lot of money to support this team. I get it. You think they're going to win a Super Bowl. We disagree. That doesn't make anybody less of a fan than you. And last time I checked, you don't get to pull fan cards. So don't come in here causing a fuss, being a douche because you think you're the king fan. That's not the way it works. Dave says, love you, Jesse. So many of these fans have no real idea about football. They won't admit when they where they are lacking. Brick is bad fourth quarters. Lyle has blown more 10-point leads than any coach in NFL history, and Jet is a weak miss in the 90s. Then you have Dave, who is completely on the other end. So that's what Dave does. Yeah.
I think just
I
at
don't agree
times,
with
like,
that
you
either,
could be a
Dave. I don't
fan.
agree with that either.
Like, I kind of feel like, so for example, like, as someone who is a diehard Niner fan, right? Like, I grew up diehard Niner
Mhm.
fan, but at the same time, like, take your hat off, take your Niner fandom hat off sometimes. Like, I started doing this, and it's like, all right, like, it's a lot easier to watch games when you're going in with an expectation that, man, this team does match up better than us. Like, they are a better team on paper. They might beat us this game. Like, it, and then come game day, as soon as the kickoff happens, you can't tell me nothing. The Niners are the greatest team ever. Like, they're going to win every game. They're 17-0 at the start of every game, if you ask me. But, like, I feel like a lot of fans forget to remember there's 31 other teams. There's 31 other teams who are getting better every year. There's 30 other one teams who pay players to win games. And I feel like that's something that is lacked throughout all of sports. And I feel like at the end of the day, calling people fake fans, like you said, who are in here months out from a regular season game or
Eating
even training camp.
49ers content. Yeah.
Like, it's
Like they're
crazy. Like,
clearly these are like these are the fans. There's fans and then there's fans. And anybody in here, including yourself, 49ers 83, I would put in here if you are in this chat in watching live content on the 49ers in April on a random Wednesday, you're a fan of the team. I think debating that with anybody is absolutely crazy. There's not one person in here that isn't a diehard fan of their team. And then there are some people that are, but they admit it. Hey, I'm an Eagles fan or I'm a Rams fan. And they just like the content because they've seen me, do cross shows with other people or what have you. But the people that say they're 49er fans, they're 49er fans. And there are 49er fans older than us. Brother, we were both, I assume you were born in 83 with a name like that. I was born in 83 also. There's fans in here that are 10, 15 years older than you and I that saw all the glory years, that were here for all the Super Bowls. So I think it's crazy to look at somebody's fandom and gatekeep it. People fan differently. Some people are pessimistic. Some people are optimistic. So, everybody's a little bit different. I hate it when people start gatekeeping fandom. It's absolutely wild to me.
Jesse, don't even talk. You're not even a Niner fan. You live in Florida, bro.
That's true. Dave says, Jesse, did I call it 7-10 last year? You did. You said the Niners would be 7-10 before the season started. Dazza says, I'm a 49er fan for 25 years, but I'm also a realist. We're coming off of a 6-11 season. We have a lot of question marks in teams like the Eagles, Lions, Bucks, Packers that are getting better. I would throw in the Bears, the Vikings, the Cardinals, the Rams. I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. I think the 49ers can make the playoffs. My expectation is they make the playoffs. I would not put the expectation on them that they win the Super Bowl. But if you want to think that they're going to win the Super Bowl, again, much like you, I don't want you to gatekeep my fandom. I'm not going to gatekeep yours. If you think they're going to win the Super Bowl, then think that. It is what it is. Fan how you want to fan. Anyways, all right, y'all. Listen, we got NBA basketball going on. Marco, thank you so much for joining me, man, talking about the draft, recapping it. I really appreciate you. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for contributing. And I hope that everybody has a blessed night. I think I'll be back tomorrow with Sunil and then live after that on Bleacher Report. Appreciate everybody. Much love. Have a blessed night. Peace.